Boom! Unglaublich! Da hauen die das nächste Ding hier raus. Die Frage war ja eigentlich schon immer, oder die Frage stand schon immer im Raum, wo sind denn die ganzen verschwundenen Kinder hin? Warum findet man nun einen Bruchteil? In der Kabinettssitzung in den USA erwähnen die das einfach so still und leise am Rande. Die nächste V-Theorie, die wahr wird. Das Video komplett im Anschluss, schaut euch das an und teilen. Das völlige Aufwachprogramm.
Well, RFK Jr. just admitted what we've been reporting for years here on this show, that the U.S. government was trafficking children. More than 350,000 children were sold off and trafficked for sex and slavery in the United States. Here's RFK just kind of casually dropping this in a cabinet meeting today. Watch.
We have ended HHS as the role as the vector, the principal vector in this country for child trafficking. And during the Biden administration, HHS became a collaborator in child trafficking and for sex and for slavery. And we have ended that, and we're very aggressively going out and trying to find these children, the 300,000 children that were lost by the Biden administration.
I mean, what? Okay. HHS responsible for this. We also know the Department of Homeland Security as well. Maybe we'll hear more from that from Kristi Noem when she lets the cat out of that bag. But this is an unbelievable admission that the United States government, his own agency, he's got the documents to show, we're helping to traffic hundreds of thousands of children south of the border into the United States, sold off for sex slavery, sex trafficking, and then killed. Independent journalist Ryan Mata has been trying to get answers about these missing children for years now. He's made it a mission. Of course, he's got multiple documentaries that you can check out, trafficked, multiple. You've got so many now, I can't keep track of how many covering this story. It's so sad that you even have to do this work, for crying out loud. And I know you are just fed up. You are absolutely fed up. And I feel you, man. I feel you, brother, on this. Like, where are these children? Where are the 350,000 children we were told we were going to find them and we were going to get answers? And now we're 100 days later. So we've got good news and bad news, right? We got RFK admitting this, but we still don't know where these children are. So what did you make of RFK's comments, Ryan?
You know, Clayton, I'm finally excited to hear the Trump administration at least talking about it again, right? They campaigned on it for almost 2 years, talking about these missing children. And I thought day one, I promised everybody there is no way that Trump takes office and on day one, we're not kicking in doors, right? We have this operation I've explained on your show, so I won't go into detail how it works. I have a lot of documentaries out there that you can watch. But when these children are being processed into this system, they are handed over to Border Patrol by the cartels, and the Border Patrol receives the child, and the children have a phone number or a name tag, kind of safety pinned to their shirt, or sometimes the cartels will even write a permanent marker on their arm, and they're writing a name, an address, and a phone number. Border Patrol processes that child, and when he's processing the child, he's putting that information by policy into the child's file as the sponsor. Then he calls HHS. HHS comes and picks up the child, takes them and does an initial intake screening at HHS. And they're vetting that adult. So they're trying to contact that sponsor. After they interview the child, they try to contact that sponsor and vet that sponsor. We'll call it vetting if you actually call it that. During that process, they're communicating via WhatsApp. So our government was in contact with every single adult that we delivered one of these children to for at least 14 days, sometimes months at a time. So our government had all of that geolocation data of every cell phone that was used to receive every single child. And some of these men have received up to like 30 or 40 children. So that means all that time they were communicating, you would have their trails, you would know where they went, you know where they lived, you know where they'd shop. We could go out right now, Clayton. I have a list of 8,000 addresses of every single one of these children, where they were delivered to. Me and you could go out tomorrow and probably find 100 of them like that. That so quick, Clayton, it would make your head spin. Even Alex Jones will admit it. In one day, you can go out and find 15 kids. No problem. Anthony Rubin and Carlos Arellano went door to door and were finding some of these children. So if our government wanted to, we could have brought all of these children that are still alive home already.
Right, but the report that HHS, let me follow up on that, because the report that HHS released last September did acknowledge that it had lost these 300,000 children. They knew of their existence and they sort of lost them into the ether, even though they had some information they could follow up on. And there were reports, this one's haunted me ever since, of, for instance, they went and checked on one of these addresses. They found this child. The woman said, "My husband is sexually abusing this child. You should take it away." And they had no recourse to do that. So they know where they are. They know who's being abused. And under the Biden administration, they could do nothing but walk away from a child that was being raped.
Some of these children are being found at homeless shelters. So they're escaping their captives and they're arriving at homeless shelters. And the homeless shelter is contacting HHS and trying to get HHS to take the kid back. And HHS is like, well, not our problem anymore. That's a true story. That really happened.
So whose problem is it? What do we do when we find these children? Who has the legal authority to say, you're out of here? Your days of being trafficked and raped are over. Who can do that?
There is nobody. And our government shouldn't be that person. Our government has shown and proven that in no world should our government ever be responsible for handling children. No government organization should ever be allowed to do so. They've taken custody of 452,121 children ages 0 to 17 over the last 4 years. And they've vetted the adult sponsors that they delivered these children to, and then delivered 350,000 of these children that they can no longer locate. And we know the horrors and what's happening to these children. Now, we do have a little bit of good news as far as the Trump administration, if you guys want to get into that, as far as decreasing the amount of children that are coming across the border. There's some really big things that we can get into as well.
Well, that's a big piece of this, right? You have to stop the bleeding first. Mm-hmm. So we've got to secure the border. We've got to stop the flow of these kids coming across the border. So where are we at with that?
So the biggest policy decision that nobody's talking about that has taken place under the Trump administration took place on March 14th of 2025, and that was the DNA testing expansion. Now, if you go to HHS's official website, this is actually active. So it sounds like, I haven't got any confirmation, but at the very least, it looks like we have re-implemented the DNA testing policy. So during the Biden administration, in his first day in office, he signed like 93 executive orders and completely obliterated every one of Trump's immigration policies, removing DNA testing from that. So that means that as these children were coming across during Trump's, I think this was in 2019 or 2018 when Trump implemented the DNA testing, and they DNA tested the first batch of migrant children that were coming across that border, 47% were not the parents. That means these adults that were coming across these children, think about a trafficker with his hands on the shoulders of a child saying, yeah, you're my child, you're my child. And that kid looks up and goes, yeah, I'm his child, right? And they would just release them. Well, now Trump implemented the DNA testing, which was instant, only took 45 minutes to DNA test these children. They can get the results. And I'm not saying every case was perfect and they got right back with their parents in 45 minutes. Not always the case. But I think the policy was that they had to do it within 72 hours or they could be sued. So almost every kid was DNA tested and they would know within 72 hours if that was the parent or not. And they would be reunited right back with the parent and then released into America. So Trump's policies have been re-implemented. Now, why is that so important? So we have talked about numbers on year over year.
Can you I'm sorry. Why would the Biden administration stop doing that? They stopped it in 2023.
They're facilitating it.
What is the argument that they would put forth saying we should not check that these kids are with their own parents?
There was absolutely no argument. Just like when they're trying to convince you that men can get pregnant. It's just we can't have that conversation because there's no logic behind it. And when you remove that, what you're doing here, this whole immigration process was to destroy and collapse civilization in America. And the only way that you can do that is to continue to move these children. And you have to disappear them however you can, because the only two times that the border was ever shut down, it was once during COVID and then once under Obama. And that was when the children were piled up on the border and the media was down there and you were seeing kids laying in the dirt behind chain link fences with those tinfoils like sleeping bags. And the media was so outraged and there was so much outrage they had to shut down the border. So in order to keep this weaponized mass migration and funnel 30 million migrants into our country over the last 4 years, the children were just collateral damage. And then everybody started to go, oh, wow, the prison industrial complex saw this and goes, oh, wow, we can create a migrant child prison industrial complex and profit off these children just like we profit off the prisoners in America. And that's what you've seen playing out here.
Well, I mean, let's talk about some of these centers, because at the beginning you said, like, Clayton, you and I, we know where these people are. We could just go and grab a whole bunch of these kids right now and rescue them. We know, and we've covered here on the show, Carlos Arellano and others, where these massive facilities are. These former Walmart facilities that are now used as trafficking centers where these children are rounded up, kept, and then they're facilitated and sent out on flights delivered across the United States and all facilitated through these NGOs backed by the Biden administration. So we know in Texas, for instance, Greg Abbott loves to put on a good face. We know in Texas where these units are, these centers are. Why is the Trump administration not swooping in and closing these things down where thousands of children are currently, right now, as you and I talk, are being kept in Texas?
Clayton, that is probably the $1 million question. There's 290 of them under OR's care. So across the United States, I think in 39 states, there's 290 of these facilities that hold these migrant children. When I flew into Brownsville, Texas, and you were the first network to break that story on these child detention facilities. When I landed at the Brownsville Walmart to go drone these with Carlos, within 15 minutes of landing at the Brownsville Airport, he took me to 5, Clayton. The largest one was a Walmart that holds, their capacity was like 1,100 or 1,200. There was 2,000 boys in there. Picture Walmart on its busiest day, like Christmas Eve, where you can't even park in the parking lot. This parking lot was that jam-packed. You guys saw the videos. You played it on your show. Every spot in the entire parking lot was filled, and these kids aren't driving themselves. Those are just the employees that were working inside that Walmart that took up every single parking lot in Walmart, and they have an overflow parking lot in the back that was solidly full as well. From there, I went to a girls' facility that held 600 girls ages 0 to 12. That was one where they had the giant pole barn looking facility. And Carlos is like, oh yeah, that's cribs as far as the eye can see, just 60 cribs, one after another, with only 3 employees taking care of 60 crying little babies in these cribs. He said it was a nightmare. Anytime that he had to go pick up children from that facility, he'd get a text being like, oh, you're going to the Donna facility or whatever the name of that facility was. And he'd be like, oh man, we'd all be like dreading, like trying to text the other coworkers like, hey, can you take my shift today? Because nobody wanted to go, because if you were picking somebody up from that facility, it meant you were most likely picking up a child, an infant. And then they were going to have to traffic this infant across state lines without a car seat, without diapers, without formula, without food. And he would have these babies for like 18 hours without any necessity. And JJ goes, Carlos, how would you, the kid's crying, he's in diapers, how do you change him? You have to change a kid like 8 times a day. And Carlos goes, I know, it was so uncomfortable, because by the time we'd get the baby to the final destination, it was screaming in agony and pain because it was sitting in its own urine and feces for 18 hours while that poop's burning his butt, and he's screaming, and everybody's looking at Carlos like, why does this giant chubby Mexican dude have an Asian little baby that's screaming his head off and he doesn't look like a father? Right? These are the conditions, and we're trafficking these children across state lines. Then I went to another facility that held boys ages 0 to 17, that held 400 boys. Another facility that held girls ages 13 to 17. And the really weird ones are the ones that are children ages 13 to 17. They're always the smaller facilities with a 50 to 100 person capacity, and it's boys and girls. Why are they mixing migrant boys and girls in one facility? They're always the small facilities that have the minimal amount of staff. And you're putting children that have, 80% have been sexually assaulted. They're very hypersexualized, and you're putting them in a facility together with minimal staff. What do you think is going to happen in those facilities?
Now, we had whistleblowers on this show from Health and Human Services that said, this is what's happening. We had whistleblowers all for the last 4 or 5 years. Where's the Justice Department on this? Why are they not, following these whistleblowers, prosecuting anybody who was complicit inside the U.S. government?
Natalie, I'm so glad you asked. So this got so out of hand that Merrick Garland's DOJ had to open and file a lawsuit against Southwest Key Programs. If I were to read that on your show, this episode would get taken down. If I just read off what happened to the children inside these facilities that was happening to them by the staff members. We're talking about 4, 5, 6-year-old girls being R-worded by the staff members in these facilities. And if I just read you the lawsuit against all of the employees at every different facility, we're talking about 30 or 40 different facilities. It would take me a half hour. Are we talking
about NGOs or government employees?
Yes, we are talking about Southwest Key Programs. The Merrick Garland filed a lawsuit against Southwest Key Programs. They're the largest one of these child traffickers. Every facility that me and Clayton just talked about are all ran by Southwest Key Programs. So the employees were raping these children inside these facilities, and Merrick Garland's DOJ had to bring a lawsuit against them. Well, on March 14th of 2025, about 1 month and 10 days into Pam Bondi's administration, they decided to drop this lawsuit. Now, nobody's been able to explain to me why in any reality you would drop a lawsuit against Southwest Key Programs. But when they did, this was an official statement by HHS that They determined that Southwest Key programs would no longer ever be allowed to get children again. And that was why they were going to drop the lawsuit, because they were no longer receiving children. For some odd reason, they weren't going to hold them accountable for allowing what happened to the children in their facilities. But Pam Bondi's DOJ dropped that lawsuit. And then about 4 days ago, I get a message from Bonnie. She's one of the #1 world leading experts on child trafficking. And she says, you're not going to believe this. They just sent out an email to Southwest Key employees in Brownsville, Texas, that they were to return to work at Casa Padre. That was one of the big facilities that we droned to do a fall. They're returning from their furlough that took place in March. And they're going to go through additional ORR required training purposes starting on April 24th of 2025. So this took place like 6 days ago. These same Southwest Key employees, not the ones that were actually busted, but only 10% of cases get reported. So how many of these employees were taking advantage and molesting these children and now are being brought back into work? Why would you be bringing employees like this back to work and giving them additional training and telling the ones, here's the kicker, that specific employees who qualify are now going to receive health benefits and a 401k with contributions from their employer? Why would you be bringing employees back and giving them raises if you didn't plan to bring children back and put children in those facilities?
Yeah. So what are you saying? That the Biden or the new Trump administration is allowing this to happen again?
I'm saying that in order to actually give these children, if we go out and save 300,000 children, where are we going to put them? Bonnie, one of the world's leading experts, says that just to build the facilities and train the staff, you're talking about 6 to 12 months out. And she's like nose to the grindstone on this stuff. She's very well aware of what's going on. She says that there is nothing in the works. So she thinks that they're going to try to magically redeem Southwest Key programs and like rebrand their image and then start going and claiming that we're rescuing these children by putting them back into Southwest Key's care.
Okay. Well, Ryan Mehta, thank you for bringing us this story. It's absolutely bonkers. And we need to stay on top of it because it's not enough to just say, we know that there are these 300,000 children. We knew that from the Biden administration. They flat out released a report. We know that number is very conservative. It's probably twice that. And then for RFK Jr. to say, that's over now. It's done now. We don't do that anymore. Obviously, that's not enough. We need to continue to follow this. So that's why you can follow Ryan Mehta and all of he posts his documentaries on X and other places. So good to see you as always.
God bless. Thank you.